Imagine that you need a stranger to help you. You can push harder, speak louder, list every reason you are right, and make the request feel like a test of strength. Or you can do something far less dramatic. You can slow down, notice what the other person values, give them room to choose, and make it safe for them to cooperate. The first approach may win a moment. The second can win the person without making them feel defeated. That difference is the heart of Bob Burg's The Art of Persuasion. The book carries the subtitle Winning Without Intimidation, and that phrase is more than a sales slogan. Burg's argument is that lasting influence does not come from cornering people. It comes from helping them reach a decision they can still respect after the conversation ends. A threat can produce compliance while the threat is present. Pressure can force a signature while the pressure is strong. But resentment waits. The person who feels tricked, humiliated, or trapped will avoid you, reverse the decision, warn other people, or quietly stop cooperating. A persuasive agreement, by contrast, can survive your absence because the other person sees a reason to support it. This is a book from the practical people's skills tradition rather than an academic textbook. It is built from Burg's experience in sales, speaking, negotiation, and everyday encounters. Many of its lessons arrive as stories, phrases, and rules of thumb, not controlled experiments. That matters. We should not treat every claim about human behavior as a law of psychology. But the book's central discipline is strong: seek cooperation instead of control, preserve the other person's dignity, and understand that influence begins with the emotional climate you create. Persuasion itself is not automatically good. A doctor can persuade a patient to complete a life-saving treatment. A fraudster can persuade the same patient to buy a fake cure. The communication skill may look similar, but the purpose, evidence, and freedom are completely different. Ethical persuasion tells the truth, discloses important costs, welcomes questions, and leaves a real path to say no. Manipulation hides the game, exploits a vulnerability, or makes refusal unusually costly. Burg repeatedly separates cooperation from intimidation. We can make that boundary even clearer. If your method works only because the other person misunderstands what is happening, it is not a clever version of persuasion. It is deception. Burg begins with a simple observation. People act for their reasons, not ours. A manager may want a team to adopt new software because it improves reporting. The employees may care about whether it will waste their time, expose their mistakes, or make their jobs less secure. Repeating the manager's reason with greater enthusiasm does not answer theirs. The persuasive question is not merely, how do I explain my idea? It is, what would make this idea sensible from where they stand? That question demands curiosity before eloquence. Suppose you are selling a premium service to a small business owner. You arrive prepared to describe speed, features, and awards. Then you learn that the owner's real fear is not slow service. It is being abandoned when something breaks on a weekend. The entire conversation changes. A long presentation about features may demonstrate knowledge while missing the decision. One sincere question about the last time a supplier let them down can reveal more than 20 polished slides. Burg often describes decisions as emotional first and logical second. That formulation is useful if we do not exaggerate it. Human reasoning and emotion are not two rival creatures taking turns at the controls. Feelings carry information about threat, trust, belonging, and value, while deliberate thought compares consequences and checks evidence. People can reason carefully, and emotion does not make a decision invalid. The practical lesson is that facts arrive inside a relationship. A correct argument delivered with contempt may be rejected because the contempt signals danger. A warm argument supported by no evidence may be accepted when it should not be. Good persuasion needs both respect and truth. Before influencing anyone else, Burg asks you to control your own reaction. This may be the least glamorous and most powerful part of the book. When a customer insults you, a colleague interrupts you, or a partner misrepresents what you said, your first impulse may be to strike back. A reaction is immediate. A response creates a small space in which you can choose what serves the outcome. The purpose is not to become emotionless. It is to stop lending your nervous system to the most provocative person in the room. Picture a receptionist facing an angry visitor who says, "Nobody here knows what they are doing." The reactive answer is, "That is not true, and you need to calm down." It protects pride for 3 seconds and enlarges the fight. A responsive answer might be, "You have been waiting, and from your side it looks as though nobody has taken responsibility. Let me understand what happened." That sentence does not admit every accusation. It identifies the experience, lowers the need to repeat it, and moves towards information. Burg borrows the idea of adult-to-adult communication. In tense exchanges, people can slip into the posture of a scolding parent or a defiant child. The words may be spoken by grown adults, yet the pattern becomes command, shame, rebellion, and blame. Adult communication deals with the present problem. It can be firm without being theatrical. It says, here is what happened, here is the effect, and here is what I propose. It avoids, you always do this, or if you cared, you would already know. The aim is not to diagnose the other person's personality. It is to refuse an unproductive role. Tact, in Berg's account, is not weakness dressed in polite language, it is strength under control. A blunt person often claims to value honesty, as if accuracy requires abrasion. But honest information can be delivered in forms that either preserve or destroy the listener's ability to use it. Compare this proposal is a mess with the central idea is promising, but the cost assumptions are not yet strong enough for approval. Both may communicate rejection. Only one shows the person where the work must go next. Tact also means protecting face. People resist when agreement would require them to announce that they were foolish, dishonest, or defeated. If a supervisor publicly insists that a deadline cannot change, confronting them in front of the team may turn a scheduling problem into a status battle. A private conversation can provide a dignified route to revise the plan, new information has arrived, priorities have shifted, and an adjusted deadline now protects the project. Saving face must never mean hiding serious wrongdoing. It means not demanding unnecessary humiliation as the entrance fee to a good decision. The book's relationship sequence is easy to remember. People must come to know you, like you, and trust you. This is not a guaranteed formula. People sometimes buy from strangers, dislike experts they rely on, or trust someone they do not find charming. But as a practical model, the sequence explains why a technically perfect message may fail. Familiarity reduces uncertainty. Likability makes interaction easier. Trust allows the other person to believe that your recommendation will not become a trap. To be known is not to dominate the room with your biography. It is to become legible. You show up consistently. Your words and actions match. You explain your role and intentions. In digital business, where a customer may see a website before meeting a human being, legibility includes clear prices, real contact details, understandable terms, and an honest account of what the product cannot do. Mystery may create curiosity in entertainment. In a transaction, avoidable mystery creates risk. Likability is often misunderstood as charm. Berg points instead towards conduct, warmth, patience, interest, good humor, and consideration. You do not need to perform a louder personality. An introvert can be deeply likable by listening without rushing, remembering what matters and keeping a promise. Nor is likability universal. A style welcomed in one culture or relationship can feel intrusive in another. The ethical goal is not to manufacture affection. It is to remove needless reasons for discomfort and let genuine compatibility reveal itself. Trust is the slowest element because it depends on evidence over time. You can create a good first impression in minutes, but trust grows when small predictions come true. You said you would send the document on Tuesday, and it arrived on Tuesday. You admitted a limitation before being asked. You protected confidential information when sharing it would have made you look important. Trust is a pattern of kept commitments. No verbal technique can permanently substitute for it. Berg places enormous weight on making people feel important. The dangerous reading would be to flatter someone's ego so they become easier to use. The better reading is to recognize their humanity and contribution. Appreciation identifies something real. Flattery invents or exaggerates praise to purchase an outcome. If a junior colleague catches an error, say exactly what they noticed and what it prevented. If a customer explains a problem, do not treat the explanation as an interruption before your pitch. Feeling important often means feeling that one's experience has entered the decision. Names can help, compliments can help, and small courtesies can help, but sincerity determines whether they connect. Repeating someone's name every second sentence can sound like a sales script. Praising a stranger's brilliance without evidence can create suspicion. Specificity is safer. Thank you for explaining the timeline so clearly tells the person what you appreciated. You are amazing tells them almost nothing. Recognition works best when it is accurate enough to be believed and freely given rather than held hostage for reciprocity. Listening is not simply waiting with a friendly face until your turn. It involves asking, checking, and allowing correction. You might say it sounds as though the price matters, but the bigger issue is whether your team can implement this before October. Have I got that right? The final question matters. A summary is not proof that you understand. It is a draft offered for revision. The listener does not get to declare unilaterally that the speaker has been understood. Research on active listening gives a useful reality check. Listening behaviors often improve satisfaction and perceived support, and recent negotiation research suggests that active listening can work with multi-issue offers to encourage more integrative discussion. But it is not a magic wand. In one study of real negotiations, active listening alone did not reliably produce better understanding or rapport. A person can imitate the form while missing the substance. The practical standard is not whether you use the correct phrases. It is whether new information changed your model of the problem. Good questions shift persuasion from performance to discovery. Closed questions confirm facts. Open questions reveal interests. What would a successful outcome look like 6 months from now? What worries you about this option? Which part is non-negotiable and why? The question is not a disguised trap. If you already know what answer you will accept, you are not investigating. Questions become persuasive because they give the other person a voice and help both sides locate the real decision. That voice is important because controlling language can create psychological reactants, the urge to recover freedom when it feels threatened. Recent research combining dozens of studies found that highly threatening wording tends to increase anger and negative thoughts, which are associated with worse persuasion outcomes. This does not mean every instruction must become vague. Emergencies, legal duties, and safety procedures sometimes require direct language. It means that unnecessary commands such as "you must agree," any intelligent person would choose this, or "there is no reason to hesitate" can make resistance part of the person's defense of autonomy. Choice should therefore be real, not decorative. Would you prefer the impossible option or the humiliating option is not autonomy. A useful choice might be whether to begin with a pilot or a full rollout, whether to meet on Wednesday or Friday, or whether to continue the discussion after independent advice. Sometimes the honest choice is yes or no. Persuasion respects that. If you punish a reasonable no, the earlier invitation was theater. The book declares that almost everything is negotiable. The spirit of that claim is resourceful rather than literal. Prices, timing, scope, responsibilities, and methods can often move. Human rights, consent, law, safety, and personal boundaries are not merely bargaining positions. An ethical negotiator asks where flexibility exists without assuming entitlement to another person's limits. When someone says a term cannot move, you can ask what constraint creates it. You cannot assume persistence will eventually convert every boundary into permission. The heart of negotiation is the difference between a position and an interest. A supplier's position is payment in 14 days. The interest may be cash flow. A buyer's position is payment in 60 days. The interest may be approval cycles. Arguing over the two numbers creates a tug of war. Understanding the interests might reveal a partial upfront payment, milestone billing, a smaller initial order, or a financing arrangement. Persuasion becomes creative when the answer is not hidden inside either opening demand. Preparation makes this possible. Before a negotiation, define the outcome you want, the outcome you can accept, and the point at which walking away is better. Identify what you can trade cheaply that the other side may value highly. A flexible start date might cost you little and solve their staffing problem. Faster payment might help them more than a small price increase helps you. Without preparation, people concede whatever is mentioned last or cling to a symbolic demand because they cannot see alternatives. Concessions should be deliberate and reciprocal, but not petty. If you move, explain what makes the movement possible and ask for something that protects the balance. We can reduce the first year fee if we use the standard implementation schedule. This prevents a concession from being mistaken for proof that the original price was invented. Yet do not create fake scarcity or an inflated opening demand merely to stage generosity. That may win a transaction and poison the relationship once the tactic is discovered. Silence is another tool, and it must be used with care. Nervous negotiators often answer their own questions, weaken their offer, or concede before the other person has processed it. Ask clearly and allow time. Silence becomes manipulative when used to punish, ostracize, or make a vulnerable person panic. A quiet pause that permits thought is different from the silent treatment. The distinction is whether the space supports a decision or makes connection conditional on surrender. Difficult people occupy a major part of Burg's practical world. His first move is to separate the person from the behavior. Calling someone difficult can become permission to stop learning. Perhaps they are under pressure, guarding a legitimate constraint, responding to a past breach, or simply communicating in a style you dislike. None of that excuses abuse. It does help you choose whether the problem calls for clarification, an apology, a boundary, documentation, or exit. When anger is high, acknowledge emotion without automatically accepting the story attached to it. You can say, "I can see that this has been extremely frustrating," while still investigating whether every claim is accurate. Let the person describe the problem, then move towards specifics: what happened, what evidence exists, what can be repaired, and what cannot. Do not confuse endless venting with resolution. Research does not support the simple catharsis idea that intensifying anger reliably empties it. Lowering arousal and restoring agency are generally more useful than feeding the performance. Apologies are persuasive when they are not disguised arguments. "I am sorry you were offended" places the failure inside the listener. I am sorry I shared that information without asking names the act. A complete repair acknowledges impact, accepts the relevant responsibility, explains without using the explanation as an excuse, and changes the process. If you made no error, do not confess to one merely to end discomfort. You can regret the harm, correct misinformation, and remain truthful at the same time. Complaints offer a test of the entire philosophy. A company can treat the complaining customer as an enemy to defeat or as an expensive source of information. Begin by making ownership clear. Ask what a fair remedy would be. Do not promise what cannot be delivered. Then look beyond the individual case, what allowed this to happen, and how can the system prevent repetition? A refund accompanied by the same broken process is not customer service. It is a subscription to future complaints. Sales in Burg's model should be service before pressure. The salesperson's job is not to transfer every available product into every available wallet. It is to determine whether there is a fit. That means being willing to say, this is not the right solution for you. The short-term cost can build long-term credibility, referrals, and self-respect. More importantly, it protects the buyer. The sale that should not happen is not a persuasion failure. Preventing it can be the most persuasive evidence of your integrity. Referrals also work better as mutual connection than extraction. Instead of asking a customer to hand over a list of friends, make it easy for them to recognize a relevant situation. Describe the problem you solve, the people you serve best, and how an introduction can be made without pressure. Respect privacy. Never use someone's name as implied endorsement without permission. In modern digital marketing, disclose paid relationships and incentives. Trust cannot survive hidden sponsorship forever. The same principles move beyond business. In a family disagreement, persuasion begins by abandoning the fantasy that winning the argument automatically repairs the relationship. A parent can explain a safety rule while hearing a teenager's need for independence. Partners can negotiate responsibilities by making invisible work visible instead of keeping a private score. Friends can make requests without turning affection into debt. The goal is not permanent agreement. Healthy relationships include disagreement, refusal, and different values. Power complicates every technique. A manager who says, "You are completely free to decline this weekend work," may still control promotions. A teacher asking for honest criticism still controls grades. A caregiver, financial advisor, or romantic partner may know vulnerabilities that make influence unusually potent. The more power you hold, the less you should rely on mere verbal consent. Build safeguards, independent advice, cooling off time, clear criteria, confidential feedback, and no retaliation. Ethical intent is useful, but good systems do not require others to trust your self-assessment. Language shapes the emotional cost of agreement. Burg encourages positive phrasing, but positive does not mean pretending every problem is an opportunity in a cheerful costume. A customer whose money has disappeared does not need to hear that the situation is exciting. They need clarity, ownership, and a remedy. Useful positive language points towards action without denying reality. The shipment is late. Here are the two options we can guarantee today. False positivity asks the injured person to protect the persuader from discomfort. The word "but" often erases everything placed before it. I understand your concern, but announces that the understanding was a waiting room for contradiction. Try joining truce with, and I understand that the delay has put your launch at risk, and the earliest safe delivery is Thursday. The revised sentence does not change the constraint. It allows recognition and reality to coexist. No word is universally bad, but habits of phrasing reveal whether we are listening or merely softening a refusal. Persuasion also benefits from reasons, provided the reason is real. People want to know why a request matters, how a decision was reached, and what will happen next. A team is more likely to accept an inconvenient process when the safety purpose is specific and the burden is shared. A vague, because management decided so adds authority without understanding. An invented reason is worse. Explanation should expose the logic to inspection, not decorate a demand. Reciprocity is powerful because social life depends on return care. If someone helps us, we often want to help in turn. Burg's service orientation can create this naturally, but generosity must not become an invisible invoice. A free meal, gift, or favor should not purchase access, intimacy, or a decision the recipient would otherwise reject. State commercial expectations. Make gifts appropriate to the relationship. A person should be able to appreciate what you gave without discovering later that gratitude was a contract. Social proof and authority deserve the same caution. Testimonials, expert opinion, and evidence that others chose an option can reduce uncertainty. They can also bypass evaluation. 1,000 reviews mean little if they were purchased, filtered, or written by people with a different need. An impressive title does not establish expertise outside its domain. Show the relevant credentials, disclose incentives, preserve negative feedback, and give enough information for the listener to judge the fit. Modern regulations reflect this ethical principle. Paid endorsements and material relationships should be disclosed clearly, and claims should be substantiated. The legal details differ across countries and products, so a business needs appropriate advice. The larger lesson is universal. The fact that a message becomes less persuasive when the audience learns the full context is evidence that the context mattered. Hiding it is not a communication improvement. Written persuasion removes many signals that help repair misunderstanding. An email intended as efficient can sound cold. A long explanation can look evasive. Urgency can become a red subject line sent to everybody. Begin with the decision the reader must make, then the reason, evidence, options, and next step. Make the cost of saying no visible and reasonable. If tone or stakes are difficult, use a conversation rather than escalating through paragraphs that each side rereads as proof of hostility. Digital scale increases responsibility. A platform can test thousands of versions and discover which color. Countdown or notification keeps people clicking. Behavioral effectiveness does not prove legitimacy. A design that makes subscription easy and cancellation obscure has persuaded through friction, not value. A healthy interface makes important terms readable, defaults defensible, and exit possible. The test is whether you would still endorse the design if a person you loved were tired, hurried, and financially vulnerable while using it. Culture changes the meaning of directness, eye contact status, silence, and disagreement. In one group, openly challenging a proposal signals engagement. In another, it threatens harmony or rank. Neurodivergence, disability, anxiety, and trauma also affect communication. A person who avoids eye contact may be concentrating, not concealing. Someone who needs written questions may be processing carefully, not resisting. Persuasion improves when you ask about communication preferences instead of treating your own style as a universal operating system. Consider a complete negotiation. A freelance designer wants a higher fee. The client says the budget is fixed. Pressure would turn the fee into a referendum on who deserves respect. Curiosity reveals several interests. The client must remain under this quarter's cash limit. The designer needs the project to justify blocking 6 weeks. And both care about launch quality. They explore a smaller initial scope, payment across 2 quarters, a longer deadline, and a separate fee for extra revisions. No clever sentence creates a solution. Information does. Now consider performance feedback. A manager wants an employee to improve accuracy. Beginning with a personality verdict, "You are careless," makes the person defend identity. Begin with observable instances, impact, and a shared standard. 3 invoices contain the old tax rate, which delayed payment. Let us trace where the template failed and agree on a check before sending. The manager must still be honest about repeated performance and consequences. Respect is not vagueness. It is precision without unnecessary injury. Persuasion can fail even when performed well. The other person may possess different values, interpret the evidence differently, or have an alternative you cannot match. This is not proof that you forgot a technique. Burg's title, "Promise is an Art, Not Mind Control." A mature persuader can hear no without treating the listener as broken. They may ask what determined the decision, learn what is useful, and leave the relationship intact. Results should therefore be evaluated on more than agreement. Did the other person understand material facts? Could they ask questions? Was consent freely given? Did the solution perform as described? Would they choose to deal with you again after experiencing the outcome? A technique that raises the yes rate while increasing regret, cancellation, and distrust is not effective in the full-time horizon. Create a persuasion journal for several important conversations. Record what you assumed the other person wanted, what they actually said, where you felt reactive, what evidence changed the discussion, and what happened later. This reveals recurring errors. Perhaps you explain before asking, concede too early, avoid clear requests, or become rigid when status feels threatened. Improvement comes from observing your pattern, not adopting somebody else's theatrical confidence. There is one more form of persuasion. Burg's philosophy helps us understand is self-persuasion. People often defend conclusions they help generate more strongly than conclusions handed to them. Instead of telling a colleague that a proposal cannot work, ask them to walk through cost, timing, and failure conditions. Instead of lecturing a teenager about sleep, ask what they notice on the mornings after late nights and what experiment they would consider. The purpose is not a sequence of trap questions leading to your predetermined answer. It is to let reasoning become participatory. Teach back makes this visible. After explaining a complex service, ask the customer to describe in their own words what happens, what it costs, and what they expect. Frame the request as a test of your explanation, not their intelligence. Misunderstanding discovered before agreement is valuable. In medicine, finance, law, and safety, comprehension is part of consent. A nod is not enough. Stories can carry values and consequences more vividly than abstract claims. A story about one delayed shipment may help a team see how a small data error reaches a real family, but narrative can overrule statistics because memorable cases feel representative. Pair the story with the broader evidence. Explain whether it is typical, exceptional, or merely illustrative. Never borrow another person's trauma as emotional material without permission. Humor can release tension when it is shared rather than aimed downward. A leader who jokes about their own minor mistake may make correction safer. A leader who jokes about an employee's accent, body, or failure uses laughter to recruit the room into power. If the target cannot comfortably decline participation, the joke is not a neutral people skill. Persuasion should reduce social threat, not hide it behind entertainment. The best long-term negotiators build a reputation for accurate warnings. When they say a deadline is real, others believe them because previous deadlines were not theater. When they say a concession is final, the record supports it. This means giving up fake urgency and the pleasure of winning trivial points. Credibility compounds slowly and can be spent once. Before any high-stakes request, run an ethical pre-flight check. Is my factual claim supported? Have I disclosed the information that could reasonably reverse the decision? Is the person able to understand and refuse? Am I exploiting time pressure I created? Would I be comfortable if the full interaction were reviewed by someone whose judgment I respect? If an answer troubles you, improve the offer before improving the pitch. There are also situations where persuasion should stop. If someone is intoxicated, cognitively impaired, frightened for their safety, or unable to understand the consequences, a yes may not be meaningful. If a person repeatedly ignores your boundary, better phrasing may not solve the problem. Document, seek help, leave, or use formal processes. Burg's optimism about dealing with people should not become a command to remain in abuse. Winning without intimidation includes refusing to be intimidated. To practice the book, start with one conversation rather than trying to become universally charismatic. Before it begins, write down your desired outcome and the other person's likely concerns. During it, ask 2 genuine questions before giving your main argument. Summarize what you heard and invite correction. Present the evidence, including an important limitation. Make a clear request with a real choice. Afterwards, ask whether the result was good for both the immediate decision and the future relationship. Then audit your trust account. Choose one promise you have delayed and complete it. Correct one claim you have overstated. Thank one person specifically without asking for anything in return. Remove one pressure phrase from a message. Decide your walk-away point before the next negotiation. These actions are less exciting than memorizing a clever line, but they create the conditions in which ordinary words become credible. The deepest lesson of the art of persuasion is that influence is not something you suddenly apply to another person. It is the accumulated meaning of how you behave. Every kept commitment, fair refusal, honest limitation, and respectful disagreement teaches people what contact with you costs. If contact costs dignity, they will resist even your good ideas. If contact preserves agency and adds clarity, they may listen even when the answer is not yet yes. If you enjoy detailed book explanations that keep the useful ideas, test the claims and turn them into practical tools, subscribe to Hyperlocal. It helps this channel keep making careful, long-form videos without reducing important books to a handful of slogans. Share this explanation with someone who believes persuasion has to mean pressure, and tell us which difficult conversation you would now approach differently. Real persuasion leaves no conquered person behind. It does not make another human smaller so your idea can look larger. It gives truth a respectful path into the room, allows freedom to remain at the table, and creates an agreement that both people can still call their own when the conversation is over.